Hello and welcome back to my small little library. Today we are gonna talk about what I read in November, which wasn't much. Let's wrap up all of November. I only finished 6 books and I DNF'd 2. So yeah, this was, I think, the worst reading month since I started videoing it, I think. It had different factors. One factor was I got a new tattoo. I had some struggles with the healing process of it, which made me not be able to use this arm pretty much. Like, it was nobody's fault, but sometimes things happen. And then I was pretty burned out this month, so yeah. it just wasn't the best month, you know? So let's start with the first book that I read in November, and it was actually a pretty big book. Stephen King, 11/22/63. I didn't love it, but I also didn't expect to love it. I think it was too much of a contemporary for me in the end. But I still gave it 4 stars because, hear me out a little bit. This is about time travel and the opportunity for our main character to stop Kennedy from being assassinated. That's pretty much the goal of his. And I understood the ending. I didn't love it. I would have loved a little bit of a more, I don't know, just some kind of a different ending. It was a really fitting ending, it just wasn't my favorite. And yeah, it is a contemporary except for like the time travel. Other than that, it's really just like a more or less historical fiction, but like the historic part is the Kennedy assassination. Like, it doesn't go further in. But the thing is, I could objectively tell it was really well written, and I think how the story was told, it worked really, really well. It just wasn't keeping my attention because I didn't love the topic as much. But I felt like if you did love the topic, the book was really, really good. So that is why I gave it 4 stars, because I could see that it was a really, really good book. It just, for me, didn't work out topic-wise, but I think, like, that is such a specific thing that I found it really unfair to give it a worse rating. Even though, like, it isn't a book I personally would reread or anything like that, I would still recommend this to anyone. So I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a fair rating, I think, even though it might not be like a completely influenced only by me rating, I would say, like that, if you get me. Just, you know, I just felt it was a little bit more fair to the book to give it that rating, because it is a really good book. It just, for me, it was really boring at parts. Because there's a lot about the life of our main character, like just his life. Like, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. It just didn't work out for me, so you know. But I would recommend, like, if you want to read a time travel story where somebody tries to stop the Kennedy assassination and he brings a lot of personality in there, like, I really like the main character, this is definitely one for you. I mean, it is an older book now. I think it's 12 years old, so a lot of you have probably read it already, but yeah, if you haven't, do definitely read it. It is really good. After that, I listened to an audiobook that is called What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I get that 3 stars. It is a horror book, but it is sold as a horror book. For me, it was just too mild. It wasn't what I wanted. I'm much more of like a scare me person. Like, please make me feel uncomfortable with your horror book. What Moves the Dead was like a kind of touching story. It is pretty much our main character, who is a woman in the army of this like small country. I think it's a European country. And she visits a friend of hers, and the brother of the friend wrote her a letter that he thinks the friend is dying, and so our main character goes there and tries to find out what's happening, and she just finds both of them in like a really like bad state health-wise, and so she tries to find out what's happening, and it has a lot to do with mycology and mushrooms in general. And at the beginning I was like, oh, what a cool topic. But then it wasn't really horror in my opinion. It was like more like a dark, sad mystery. But that isn't what I expected it to be. So I gave it 3 stars. I don't think it's bad writing style. I think the writing style fits it really well. It just wasn't what I expected, and it was too mild of a horror book for me personally to enjoy. So yeah, 3 stars. I do think it's a series. I don't think I will continue with it because it's just too mild for my personal taste. But if you do want like a really mild horror book that just gives you just like an inkling of like haunted house mystery vibes, I would go with it. I think it works quite well for that. It just doesn't give you like these scary feels or like the uncomfortable feels that like a lot of other horror books will give you, so you have to be careful with that. Then I read the first of 2 Clive Cussler books I read this month, and both of them got 2 stars. Both of them were more on the boring side. This is The Navigator, and it's your typical Numa file story. This one is a Kurt Austen adventure. In these books, it's always the main character who's like a ladies' man, and he works for Numas. They are specialized in water rescues and like bringing ships back to the surface, doing underwater stuff like that. And they help out in like they just help other scientific agencies and try to kind of like solve these like cases of things happening. And this one was I actually can't remember much of it. I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't remember much of it. I do know it has something to do with like navigation to a special place, and it starts like really, really early. I think like 900 BCE. Yeah, about 900 BC. And then we get like different people who are connected with this like navigator statuette, and brothers trying to kill each other and stuff like that. But in the end, it just felt boring to me compared to the other ones I've read so far in the series, and it really nothing stuck with this book, so I just wouldn't recommend it. I think there are good books in that series, and there are more boring books in this series. It's like I feel like it's like a lot of these like action series or like thriller series. You have like better books and not so great books, and like it evens out in the end. So that is kind of what happened with that book. Then I finally tackled Scythe. I can't pronounce the name. I'm really sorry. By Neil Schusterman. It was okay. I think I'm just not in like a headspace for YA anymore. I can't really stand it anymore. I used to a few years ago. I don't know. I don't enjoy it anymore. The main characters were just too childish in certain aspects to me. There is like a love story that is not supposed to happen, love story in there, which I didn't enjoy, and then I felt like the focus of the book wasn't where I would have wanted it. It is about a kind of utopian society where nobody has to die anymore, pretty much. Like, they gave all of the government power to an AI, and the AI pretty much makes sure that everybody has food and nobody suffers. Like, there are people living in like poor conditions, but they do it because they want to, not because they need to. And so they actually managed to make it so people don't need to die anymore. Like, if you jump from a 2-story house and you would die, then you just get reborn in like one of those chambers. And because of that, they were like, okay, we need to make sure that to get new people, like to be able to have new people be born, we need to kill a certain amount of people. And they kill out of like statistics from how people used to die, and they just kind of choose from there. But they made it so that humans have to do the killing to give it a human aspect. And the book is just about 2 teenagers having to fight to get the job, even though they don't want to get the job because that is important. But I didn't like that the focus shifted more into intrigues and problems and stuff like that, and we got a little bit less about like the human aspect and just like what it entails to become a Thais. I would have loved more of a focus on that. Obviously, the focus is more on drama and stuff like that because it's a YA fiction. But yeah, that is the reason I gave it 3 stars. Because while it's not a bad book, it just wasn't where I wanted it to go, and so I didn't enjoy it in like quite a few aspects. Next up, we have another 4-star read, and that is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, the second part in the Wheel of Time series. We go back into the story pretty much like relatively quickly after the first book ends. We have all of our people together. They split their ways, and in the end, they come back together again. You know, it's your typical middle child book, because obviously it's the second in like a series of 13 or something like that. Like there are quite a few books in the series. I gave it 4 stars. It had its slower parts that I felt were a little bit too boring. And it has its problems with like, there's a horn and a dagger that get stolen twice. I felt like you could have done a little bit something different with that. Like let it be stolen once, and then maybe like let them come close but not get them back, and then get them back or something like that. But I feel like the stolen twice thing just didn't sit well with me. But it is a good continuation of the story, and I felt like, you know, our main characters have now gotten the beginning of their continuing story. You know, the girls went to the place where they can learn the magic and stuff like that. Our guys are hunting the people that stole the horn, and are trying to like keep the bad people down. And you know, there's a lot of like thinking to be done in the story. Like if you've read the first book, you know what I mean. So yeah, I think it worked out quite well in the end. It was a good continuation, and yeah, that's why I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, even though like the beginning was pretty slow, and then we had like a little bit in between that was also a little bit slower. But I mean, in such a long series, I think you can't really like change that. And then let's get to the last book I actually read, and that is Night Probe by Clive Cussler. And this one I felt was especially boring because it was pretty much just politics. This one has Dirk Pitt as the main character, but it is still the Numa Fight series. It's one series with like 2 different main characters, but they both work for Numa. The main problem is that this one is about a treaty between America and Britain that got like forgotten because the 2 people who had the treaty both died, like they were killed. And then we have an American historian who finds like some clues to the treaty, and then she tries to find out what's happening, and then the story goes from there. But we have just like our typical Doug Pitt, just like he sleeps with her like directly, and then there's a weird love triangle which is pretty dumb because Doug Pitt like sleeps with every girl he meets pretty much. So why is he connected to a love triangle? It doesn't really make sense because he never stays with a woman anyway. And then it just was so much politics. I personally don't enjoy politics. So yeah, it was too much politics. I give it 2 stars. Too little action, too much politics. Just doesn't work out for me in the end. And then let's talk about the 2 books I DNF'd. These were 2 I just knew I would DNF, so they were just books that I started reading just to confirm that I do not want to read them, that I'm not interested in them. We have The Losers by David Eddings. This is a contemporary fiction about, you know, a pretty sheltered boy who grew up as a footballer. He lived a pretty sheltered life because his mom didn't want to let go. Then his dad dies. He goes to community college to make sure his mom is not alone the first few years, and then he goes to college, meets another guy at the college who's rich and doesn't really care for college, and then his life just goes off the rails. And yeah, it was just, you know, not a book I enjoy. And then we have this one, which is historical fiction by Julian Barnes. It's called Arthur and George, and we get, well, Arthur and George's perspective of the same time. They live 2 pretty different lives, and at some point they meet, and it was just boring. I just didn't care for the main characters, and I didn't care really for the story. I'm not a fan of historical fiction if it doesn't contain magic or anything else like that. I'm not for contemporary books, you know. So yeah, I just confirmed that I have no interest in reading these books. I gave them a chance. It didn't work out, so I DNF'd both of them, which I think is the only correct way to go. So yeah, these are all of the books I read in November, which weren't many, but hey, at least I made progress, you know. That is the most important part with this. So yeah, if you've read any of these books, Please leave your opinion about them down below. If you had a little bit more luck reading, maybe leave down below what good books you read this month, because I'm always on the lookout for new good books. And yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good week, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!